Alright YouTube, so we are back, of course, talking about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and what we have today is recently Remake was one of the recipients of the Grand Award, which is given out from the PlayStation Partner Program. More specifically, in this case, with the Japan-Asia region, so these are awards given to games that were developed in those areas. And there's several awards when it comes to this partner program, but the Grand Award specifically is for the top 3 selling games from October to September of the next year. So in this case, October 2019 to September 2020. And the 3 awards were given out to a football game, or as us lowly Americans call it, soccer, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, which was a game people were really hyped on, but I haven't heard anything about that game in quite a while, and obviously, Remake. And with the awards being given out, you get brief interviews with some of the developers for those games, and in this case, with Remake, we get a small interview with Yoshinori Kitase, and he slightly, kind of talks about Part 2. But before we hop into that interview, and speaking of awards, we actually got a trailer for the Game Awards that heavily features Remake, which isn't really a surprise because Remake has 6 nominations or something. It's not the most nominations. I think Last of Us has 8, and I think that is the most. And then I believe Ghost of Tsushima has a bunch as well. But it is nice to see Remake heavily represented with this trailer, and we talked about the awards before. I'm hopeful that they win something, and most people seem to be in agreement that music would be the category they're most likely to win. A lot of people did say that they have Remake as their personal game of the year, but I just don't know if that's going to be the overall consensus when it comes to the voting and stuff. But when it comes to this trailer, if you don't include the very last segment of the trailer, the kind of post-credit scene, if you want to call it that, they actually end the trailer with a Remake clip of Tifa doing the uppercut, which I thought was kind of cool. But the actual final segment of the trailer does kind of hype up the event, because they have what I believe is Shang Tsung from Mortal Kombat 11 saying that nobody can predict what's going to happen next, and obviously that's kind of implying who's going to win what awards, but also the world premieres, because the Game Awards is a big event every year, so there's going to be new things shown and stuff.
No one can predict what happens next.
Either way, man, I am looking forward to this event. Hopefully we get some pretty cool world premieres, but also Cyberpunk's coming out that same day, hopefully. Barring any other fucking delays. Anyways, on to this interview. So Kitase says, "Thank you very much for this wonderful award. We're glad to be able to make an addition to our cabinet, continuing on from our first award for the original Final Fantasy VII, released on the PlayStation some 23 years ago. It feels like the stars aligned somewhat to receiving this award at the same time of the rebrand to the PlayStation Partner Awards. Final Fantasy VII Remake has just started, and it's yet to expand even further. The development team is hard at work on that expansion process. This one is great fuel to propel us to keep going further. Look out for developments in the future." So with that first segment of the interview, we see him talking about Part 2 briefly when he talks about, Remake is just getting started, yet to expand. And I don't know if this is a translation thing, because this is the English version of the PlayStation blog as opposed to the actual Japanese version, which the words would be slightly different. They use the word expand and expansion when talking about the future for Remake. Now, I'm not trying to imply that they're going to do an expansion pack for Part 1 or DLC for Part 1, but it's an oddly specific word to use when you could just say, the games get bigger from here or something like that, whatever. What was your thought process going into making this remake? I, along with executive producer Shinji Hashimoto and director Tetsuya Nomura, who are all part of the original Final Fantasy team, always had in the back of our minds that we wanted to make a remake someday. We just never got the opportunity to do so. The first release was a blockbuster, so we knew we had to be careful with it, but we wanted to bring even more realism to characters like Cloud and Aeris on the latest PlayStations of today. And this is why I was questioning if the translation was accurate when it came to that first part, because with this answer, he says that they were on the original Final Fantasy team, but he obviously means Final Fantasy VII. The 7's missing for some reason, and he refers to Aerith as Aeris, which was a, very well-known mistranslation when it came to the original game. And lastly, they ask, "The first remake was quite the hefty volume. What do you see from here on out?" Kitase replies with, "I'm afraid I can't give you any details just yet, but I think gamers must have gotten a good taste for the quality and depth of the production value of this latest release, even though they might have been worried about it being only up to the escape from Midgar. We pulled out all the stops to create the ideal world in Final Fantasy VII, and I think our users appreciate this effort. We're going to make sure that the worlds we develop from here on out meet the expectations of our fans." Now, it is important to note that the Japanese translation of this segment is a little bit different. We got the translation from, of course, iTaikemochi on Twitter. And it says, "I can't talk in detail of the next installment just yet. However, before this current game was released, players were probably concerned about the amount of content since it only takes place up to the escape from Midgar. However, I think that players were able to play the game and realize that the amount of content was sufficient and great quality. We aim to make the remake by surpassing the images and ideals we envisioned in the original Final Fantasy VII. I think we're able to convey that to the players. I'm sure that the world we develop from here on out will also meet player expectations as well." And I found that kind of interesting because with the English translation, there's like literal sentences missing. Like there's nothing about them trying to surpass the ideals and images of the original game. Like that's completely omitted from the English version. But something that is the same through both versions is Kitase saying that he cannot talk about Part 2 just yet, which is a more immediate like answer than we've gotten in the past. In past interviews and things, when they're asked about Part 2, they usually say, the development team's hard at work on the next installment, and we're super excited to talk about the game whenever we can, or something like that, right? Some sort of like roundabout answer. But for Kitase to say that we can't talk about Part 2 just yet, seems like we could hear something about the game soon. And when I say soon, I don't mean really soon. In the grand scheme of things, in game development, soon could be several months, a year, or something like that. But it's definitely a more, again, immediate response than we've got before. And at this point, when it comes to Remake Part 2, they've been in full development since, I believe, at least March. Obviously, COVID's kind of slowed things down a little bit, but they've been in full development for at least 8 months. They've been working on the game for longer than that. So I think definitely within at least the next year, like sometime 2021, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I think sometime in 2021, we'll definitely get something for the game. I don't know what. I don't know if it's just teaser, just them talking about it, maybe even like a trailer or something. I don't know. With our last upload, I mentioned that I'm working on a Genova video. It's not like a super massive video or anything. It's not like I'm trying to hype the video up or anything. It could be a big video, maybe, I don't know. But it's just, I want to do more immediate things about Remake, and this was just recent news. The Genova video, depending on what happens in the next day or two, will be the next upload, hopefully. Other than my dudes, that is the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. We'll send more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @dashingdavid. I'm on Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Low Gain or leave it like Cobain.